Welcome to the channel and welcome to another episode of What Makes This Game Great. Today, we're looking at a PlayStation 2 hidden gem, but I think is an amazing game. If you haven't played it yet, you should play Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame is a survival horror game developed by Tecmo. It was first released in Japan in 2001 and 2002 in North America and Europe. It was also released for Xbox in 2002. It was set in the year 1986, and the story follows Miku, who is looking for her brother, who disappeared while searching for famous novelists in the haunted Himuro Mansion. It's obviously a Japanese horror game, and it does have an interesting mechanic to it. You run into ghosts, and you fight these ghosts, not with a normal weapon, but you capture their spirits, you capture their essence using a camera. It is a camera with mystical and magical properties to it, but it is still a camera that you load film into, and the stronger the film you use, the more damage it does to the ghosts, the quicker you can capture them, etc. The camera can also be used, just like in Silent Hill Shattered Memories, to pick up hints and residuals left behind by spirits or past events. So this was a tough choice for me. Fatal Frame 1 and Fatal Frame 2 are really both great games. In fact, I could have done this episode on either one. But Fatal Frame 1 wins out because I was the original. It was the first time you used a camera as a weapon. It has that additional gameplay element to it, and it scared the hell out of me. This is a horror game that's set apart for me from other horror games. I've played Siren, I've played Resident Evil, I played Silent Hill, I played all kinds of horror games, tons of them, and I enjoy them, but very few of them have actually scared me or produced an emotional response like Fatal Frame does. In fact, we're going to unpack right now why I think this does belong in the great games list, even though it didn't see huge sales while it was out. So let's get right into it. So Fatal Frame uses various literary elements or literary tools in order to create a sense of tension. And this tension builds and doesn't go away and actually creates an emotional response while you're playing. Basically, it's a tension and fear that it creates as you're playing the game. There's not as many jump scares. There are a few jump scares in the game. There's not as many jump scares in the game as a game like Resident Evil 2. The original Resident Evil 2 had, a bunch of little jump scares in it. Or Silent Hill. Those series have jump scares in them. Or The Suffering has jump scares in it. This game just builds tension. So the longer you play, the more tension and the more fear you feel. And the reason for this is that it does use traditional literary tools in this game in order to build that fear. So let's unpack that a little bit and look at some of these. So the first one is isolation. This is used in a lot of books and a lot of horror movies to create a sense of fear or create a sense of tension with a character. So you isolate the character from what is normal and what is safe. So in this game, you're playing Miku, and she's looking for her brother, but she's the only person there that's actually alive, who's not a ghost, who's not a spirit, who's not hostile to her. She can't call for help. She can't call for police backup. She can't call for her mother to come pick her up. She is isolated in this mansion, and that's how it goes. That's all that. She's isolated in the haunted mansion, completely alone. The second thing that they do is they take the familiar and they distort it. So there's a few ways they do this. So you're in a mansion, of course, but it's not a home that's familiar to you. And for Western audiences, even the design is a little different because you have sliding doors most of the time, like you would in Japan, but not doors that swing open on a hinge like we do here in North America. That's just one of the aspects to it. But as you go through the game, you'll notice things like in fact, you notice it right away in the very first hall. There's the mansion's in a state of disrepair. It's not trashed, it's not burned down, it looks like it's been abandoned for quite some time. So they take the familiar and they distort it a little bit. Also, you're here in a stranger's home at nighttime. And being nighttime, you're not usually in a stranger's home. So that's another element of taking the familiar, what would be normal and familiar during the day, and distorting it somewhat for horror aspects or to create tension. The other thing they do in this game is that this game takes place over a series of nights. You don't actually play during the day. It's always dark outside, and you do venture outside. You venture out in the woods, you venture out into various places, and it's always nighttime. It's always dark. And that also creates a sense of tension and horror. The fourth thing that they do to create this tension, this horror, is that they create confined spaces where you have to do battle with these ghosts. These ghosts, of course, these spirits, can move through walls, they can move through the floor, they can move through the ceiling. Sometimes you're in a forest and they can move through trees, of course, and you can't always track them. Although the filament in your camera will light up as you're facing the ghost. And as the ghost gets closer to you. Sometimes you can't even see it as it gets closer to you. And this creates another sense of tension and horror, because basically you're there alone, you're in a confined space trying to fight off something that you don't even know which direction it's coming from all the time. So it layers all these things, and it layers all these things up, and it keeps them constant. And then you throw in some other elements. These are more horror movie elements. Things like eerie silence, but you can hear in the distance maybe, or hear very, very lightly some sound. Creaking floors, creaking doors as you open them. Things of this nature to make you feel that this is not normal. So, and you may alert something by opening this door, or you may alert something when you creak on the floor. Is that something? Is that your foot, the creak? Or is one of the spirits coming after you? Playing this game with a headset at night in the dark room is absolutely frightening. It really ratchets up the horror at that point. Frightening. It really ratchets up the horror at that point. Really ratchets up the fear. And I played this game, and several times I played this game through. But I played this game sometimes, and I've lasted half an hour before I've noticed my palms are sweating, my hands are shaking, my heartbeat is raised, and you feel the tension. It actually creates in you that emotional response to fear and terror. And I've got to tell you, that is something that most horror games cannot do. And that is the reason I'm putting this on my list of greatest games ever. Because this game takes horror and makes it better. It just makes it better. It just does it much, much better than any other game series I've ever played. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other games that are just as good at creating tension, creating fear, and creating horror. It's just that I haven't played any of those. And if you do have suggestions, go ahead and please leave them in the comments. Anyway, it's because of this one reason this game makes it to the list. And sometimes that's all it takes. It doesn't have to have a lot of discovery. It doesn't have to have a ton of replayability, although I have played this game several times. It doesn't have to have all kinds of hidden costumes and customization and all that other stuff, although it does have hidden costumes in it that you can unlock by beating the game. So there are things in it too that can lead it to replayability, but those things are greatly overshadowed by their use of the literary tools to create a sense of tension and a sense of fear in the player. It's an emotional response, and it is great. So, if you haven't played Fatal Frame, I think you should go out and try it. It's a little hard to find now these days. PlayStation 2, you can get it on a hard copy for PlayStation 2 if you have a PlayStation 2. But you can also get it on PlayStation 3 on the store, and you may even be able to get it on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 if you have the premium level of PlayStation Plus. I'm not sure about that, and I'm also not sure about Xbox. I know Xbox has a huge catalog of back catalog of games available, basically digital copies. But if you haven't played it and you like horror games, you've got to try Fatal Frame. And even if you don't try this original one, Fatal Frame 1, go out and try Fatal Frame 2. It's just as good. In some cases, it may be even better. But of course, this is the original. This one kind of broke the mold of what a horror game could be without using guns and other weapons to, beat zombies and other creatures to death. So go out and try Fatal Frame. You'll be glad you did. Thank you for joining me for another episode of What Makes This Game Great. I really appreciate the audience, and I appreciate your time. And if you like this content, give it a thumbs up, because I swear there's no other way for me to know that people like the content unless they actually give it a thumbs up. And I do pay attention to that. And if you have any comments, please leave a comment. You want to see more of this, or if you played Fatal Frame and maybe you just disagree and you think I should have done Fatal Frame 2, maybe I will in the future, because there are things in Fatal Frame 2 that aren't in the first one. But like I said, this is the original, and they do fear very well. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and thanks a lot.